Most founders believe they are steering their business. They set the strategy. They make the decisions. They choose the direction. What they are actually doing is managing the operation while the business follows the trajectory it was built with. And in the early stages, those two things are identical. The founder designs the system, and the system goes where the founder intended. But over time, something shifts. The founder's intentions evolve. The market changes. The goals clarify. And the system, which has no mechanism for updating itself, keeps running on the original trajectory while the founder keeps assuming their current intentions are what the business is following. You think your business is going in the direction you set. It is going in the direction it was built. Those were the same thing when you started. They are probably not the same thing anymore. Every system runs on the trajectory it was given at the point of design. It does not update because your priorities changed. It does not recalibrate because the market shifted. It continues until someone deliberately changes the architecture. And most founders are too busy running the operation to notice the operation is no longer running toward anything they would have chosen. The reason this gap opens so gradually is that there is no single moment where the trajectory diverges. There is no day where the business clearly starts going the wrong way. There are instead hundreds of small decisions, each of which makes sense in isolation, that collectively produce a direction nobody would have chosen deliberately. The process that got optimized for efficiency rather than the right client profile. The service that got added because a client asked for it rather than because it fit the vision. The hire that solved a short-term problem and created a long-term misalignment. None of those things are wrong on their own. Together they are the mechanism of drift. And because each step felt reasonable at the time, the founder has no memory of choosing the wrong direction. They just end up there. You think drift is something that happens to businesses that are not paying attention. It happens to businesses that are paying attention to the wrong things. Operational performance is not the same as directional health. A business can be executing flawlessly and drifting simultaneously. The metrics that tell you the operation is working tell you nothing about whether the operation is going somewhere worth going. Most founders only measure the first thing and call it enough. This is where the distinction between execution and governance becomes critical. Execution tells you how well the system is performing against its current design. Governance tells you whether the current design is still pointed at the right destination. Most businesses have robust execution measurement and almost no governance at all. The founder knows the revenue numbers, the client satisfaction scores, the team utilization rates. They do not know whether the business they are building still resembles the business they set out to build. And the longer they go without asking that question, the more expensive the answer becomes. Not because the business is failing, because the cost of correction compounds with every month the wrong direction gets more infrastructure built around it. You think you would notice if your business started losing direction. You would not. Directional drift has no alarm. It does not show up in the revenue. It does not show up in the client satisfaction scores. It shows up years later when the founder looks at what they built and realizes it stopped resembling what they intended somewhere around the second or third year. By that point, the drift has so much momentum behind it that correcting it costs more than building a new trajectory would have. The founders who catch drift early are not more vigilant than everyone else. They are asking a different question on a regular basis. Not how is the operation performing, but where is the operation going, and is that still where I want it to go? That question feels abstract when the business is busy. It feels urgent only after the drift has accumulated enough to become visible. And by then the cost of correction is already significant because everything in the operation has oriented itself around the wrong direction. There is also a compounding dimension to directional drift that most founders underestimate. The longer the business runs on a misaligned trajectory, the more it builds in support of that trajectory. The team gets hired for the current direction. The clients get selected for the current offer. The processes get optimized for the current workflow. All of that creates structural resistance to correction, not because correction is wrong, but because the entire architecture has oriented itself around a direction the founder never deliberately chose. Undoing that orientation requires changing not just the strategy, but the systems, the team, the client base, and the habits that formed around the wrong direction. The founders who never faced that problem are not the ones who never drifted. They are the ones who built the habit of asking directional questions before the drift compounded enough to become a structural problem. That habit is not complicated. It requires no special tools or frameworks. It requires only that the founder periodically step above the operation and ask whether it is still going somewhere they would choose if they were choosing today. Most founders never ask that question because the operation is always producing enough forward motion to make the question feel unnecessary. The motion feels like evidence that everything is fine. It is not evidence of anything except that the system has momentum. The distinction between a business that is moving and a business that is moving in the right direction is invisible from inside the operation. It only becomes visible from above it. And most founders spend their entire career inside it without ever making that distinction. Not because they are not intelligent or not committed, but because the operation is always louder than the question. And the question only gets asked when the founder has already stepped above the noise long enough to hear it. Directional drift is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of momentum without governance. The business built enough speed to keep moving on its own. What it never built was the mechanism that makes sure the movement is still intentional. And until that mechanism exists, the business is not being steered. It is just moving. The founder who understands that difference is the one who eventually builds something they actually meant to build. Next episode, we are going into something that connects directly to this. When the smartest move in your business is to stop growing, because the correction for directional drift is almost never more speed. It is almost always deliberate deceleration followed by deliberate redirection. I will see you tomorrow.